It's FFA week. Helena is a proud sponsor of the future of agriculture. Today, the blue and gold jacket influences over 735,000 members from 8,817 chapters from across the United States. Check out FieldLink episode 18 to learn how the FFA has impacted Helena employees. Herbicide application is getting close in many parts of the country, and in this episode we visit with Adjuvant Brand Manager Austin Anderson and Helena Product Specialist Dr. Michael Kenty about maximizing your investment with early weed control. Our guest commodity advisor, Jody Lawrence, will break down the impact of President Biden's recent trip to the Ukraine and how it could impact the commodity markets. And then finally, we'll travel to California to visit with agronomist Paul Crout about the agronomic state this season in wine grapes and how this critical time could impact grape yields. Stay tuned for this episode of FieldLink. And joining us today here on FieldLink is Dr. Michael Kenty and Brand Manager Austin Anderson. Dr. Kenty, tell us a little bit about your background and kind of what you do today.
I took a path into agriculture that's very unusual. I'm an Air Force brat. My grandfather was a surgeon. My mom was a nurse. And just by chance, I fell in love with farming by hanging out with some of my friends. I started in the industry 40 years ago with Sandoz doing basic research. From there, I jumped into soybean breeding, completed my doctorate in genetics, did that for about 10 years, and then had an opportunity to get back in the industry with company called American Cyanamid, was a tech rep. Also got to utilize my genetics with some of the new Clearfield rice technology, and in 2000 came to work for Helena as a nutritional product specialist. We had a reorganization in 2008. They asked me to be in charge of killing things. So since 2008, I've been managing our adjuvant portfolio, BAP, seed treatments. Initially, it was half the U.S. ag and all U.S. specialty. And then in 2011, they decided they need more product specialists. And since then, I've been in the Southern Business Unit.
Okay. And with us, brand manager, Austin Anderson, head of Adjuvants. Austin, welcome to FieldLink.
Well, thanks, Bill. Just a little bit of background on myself. So I don't necessarily have as long of a history as some of the others here that are in the room, but I started my career with Syngenta about 10 years ago, where I started out as just a retail sales rep over in eastern North Carolina, so all the way close to the beach. So where I worked in a lot of the crops like tobacco, corn, cotton, soybeans, sweet potatoes, watermelons, pickling cucumbers, you name it, they grow it. So I got the chance to work both the CP and the seeds business for Syngenta. So had a good experience there. And then about 4 years ago, I moved to Memphis where I was a marketing manager for them. Same company where I managed specialty fungicides, specialty insecticides, and the digital aspects of what Syngenta brings to the market. And then back in November of this year, I started my journey learning more about adjuvants with Helena as the brand manager here in Memphis.
Great. Well, guys, it's great to have you here today on FieldLink, and we're going to deep dive into a product called Grounded as we get ready for spring planting, and growers start to look at, hey, what is going to be in my tank, and we're going to prepare them to have a product like Grounded to help make their herbicides perform a little bit better. One of the products that we do have here at Helena is Grounded. Austin, tell us a little bit about Grounded and the history of Grounded, and what are some of the features of that product?
So Grounded is a product that Helena launched back in 1997. It's really one of our true multifunctional adjuvants. There's a lot of different components that are involved, so I think we have a good a product about getting the product on the ground, drift control, keeping the AI, right there in that top soil profile, and really compatibility. So as we know that, when we get into behind the planter type applications, there's, only God knows how many different applications and different mixes of chemicals that can go out there. So being able to make sure that we can make those things agree in the tank, and then also being able to make sure that the usability of whatever products that we're using really comes to the forefront around being able to clean out the tank efficiently and being able to make sure that we're keeping time at the forefront of every grower's mind.
You bet. And, look, today most producers are investing quite a lot into their herbicide programs. And the neat thing about Grounded is it really ensures that we're putting that herbicide on the soil where it needs to go to, so we can optimize the overall efficiency for the investment we've made. Dr. Kenty, tell us a little bit, what are some of the key factors or attributes about Grounded that really separates it from a lot of other products out there?
Well, it was originally designed to be deposition and drift, and it goes back late 70s, coming into the 80s before we launched it. But as we started, we went into Roundup Ready, got away from pre-emergence herbicides, and now with resistance management, a lot of the old chemistries come back. And one of the problems, most of those are very water soluble. And you make an application, as soon as it gets moisture, it moves into the soil, you get more, it moves through it. Adding Grounded, we found in the early years that it helps, another easy way to say it, holds the herbicide in the kill zone. Because if a pre-emergence herbicide moves below 2.5 inches, it goes below the weed seed. The weed seed has to germinate to grow through a pre, take it up, and die. So it's not that the herbicide disappeared from the soil. It just moved out of the kill zone, and Grounded stands out from everything else being able to do that with any pre-emergence applied.
So what are some typical, considerations growers need to be thinking about if they're going to plan on using a product like Grounded this year? What are some cultural practices they need to think about in terms of including Grounded into their mix?
I think number one, if they're using any herbicide that is a pre-emergence, if they're doing a pre-burn down or straight pre's, they need to use it. They need to consider the rate to use based on if you're just bare ground, normal tillage, you can get by as little as 1%. If you've got what I call minimum till, stale seedbed where there's very minimum, you need to probably be a pint. If you're completely no-till, you need to be thinking a pint and a half or a full quart, because the herbicide will get tied up in the organic matter. Combining Grounded into the tank with the herbicide, to use a term our chemists used to use, oil phase. It will act like an oil. It'll move off that organic matter and get to the dirt where it'll do its job.
Austin, you've worked with you were in the industry for several years. Suppliers really like to have Grounded in their tanks. It makes a lot of those basic chemistries work and perform a little bit better. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think when you talk about a lot of the pre-emergent herbicides that we use in the business today, a lot of them have high water solubility. So from the standpoint of, you think about an inch of rain, it'll move a product an inch down in the soil. Grounded really just helps with that, whether you're talking about something like atrazine, metribuzin, or S-pentolochlor even, gives us a good advantage when it talks about being able to lay the foundation of a season where you really want to start clean and stay ahead of those weeds that are out there in the field.
You bet. And I think that's really important as we kind of learn a little bit more about Grounded today, is it really keeps that herbicide in that kill zone, as you mentioned, Dr. Kenty, in that place. But from an environmental standpoint, what a big win. We're all concerned about water quality and soil health. Grounded can really only add to, benefiting the grower by keeping that herbicide in that specific zone versus leaching.
Exactly, because one of the biggest concerns that the EPA and I think non-ag people is what's getting in our water table.
Sure.
And herbicides are very water soluble, so they're logically could move. So if you can hold it where it can do its job, be taken up by weed, or being up where there's a lot of aerobic activity and microbes, so the herbicide that's not used is biodegraded, you keep it out of the groundwater. So it is a very environmental friendly use that most people don't ever think about, that little added benefit.
And you said something on the opening too. One of the benefits with Grounded is it really helps out with drift and deposition as well.
Yes, it does. Everybody knows drift is a hot button because of some of the auxins over the top of crops. In that particular case, they want big droplets, which gravity takes over. When you're using soil applied chemistry, you need reduced driftable fines. So you get a nice uniform spray that goes to the target and stays on the target and then gets on the soil. So it is providing drift and does an excellent job, and for years was the leading drift reduction agent we sold.
So, guys, talk to me a little bit about where grounded should be used and what kind of cropping systems is it most applicable for. We talked a little bit about corn and soybeans and cotton. What about some other crops?
There's not a crop. If you're making a pre-emergence application, whether it's rice, sweet potatoes, chili peppers, onions, it does not matter. You need to put grounded in your system.
And certainly in the tree crops as
Tree
well.
crops as well.
You bet, in vineyards, I would imagine, just anything.
Anything.
Okay.
Well, it just really allows you to get more out of your pre-emergent herbicide. You know, we talk about the importance of residuals, you know, and just being able to make small things like an addition of an adjuvant like grounded from the standpoint of being able to say, you know, hey, we really want to be able to get that, 2 weeks, 3 weeks out of those residual herbicides that we're paying good money for. So just being able to make small adjustments like that really can make all the difference.
One of the things I just thought about that I don't think about much because I work the ag sector, but lawn care operators, golf course superintendents, they got a solid mass of something.
Right.
And they use a lot of pre-emergence this time of year to eliminate weed problems later in the spring when the golfers come out and kids playing in the yard. If you don't use a quarter grounded, it will not get all the way through. So a lawn care owner would end up doing retreats, which costs them time and money. So grounded is great insurance to get that herbicide to the soil instead of hung up in the thatch.
And definitely grounded has a long history. It's not a newer product,
Nope.
but it's a proven workhorse for our portfolio. What kind of feedback have you received from growers and other suppliers about grounded over the years?
From the supplier standpoint, every major basic manufacturer, tech service, R&D guys reach out to me every year. Hey, I need 2.5 gallons or 10 gallons of grounded for my trial work.
Sure.
Because they recognize the value, not only from the pre-emergent standpoint, some of them brag on it on compatibility, and then the obviously drift. So it's, being a basic manufacturer, they can't, yay, Helena's grounded is the best thing.
Sure.
Because they're kind of in a situation they can't do that. But behind the scenes, there's a preferred adjuvant for them in their trial work.
Well, coming from my experience being in the industry, adding a product like grounded can be the difference between having to walk a complaint and having a success with a product in a spray application. So when you think about just what that means for, the basic suppliers and other people like that in the marketplace, it's just time, energy, and effort that you don't have to spend when you make that extra investment to be able to make sure that that product that you're making, that application, is doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
That can definitely make their product look really well, and ours as well. We're utilizing it. And, Michael, what kind of recommendations are you using grounded for some of your growers in Mississippi and Arkansas and so forth?
In the soybean market, we're pushing Antares Complete, usually chasing the planter, and we definitely want to. I prefer a pint of grounded in that situation, but it used to at least minimum of 1%, because if you go below 1%, you lose the drift. If a guy, which is more in the West Texas, West Oklahoma market, their corn herbicides are usually chasing the planter rather than early post like we do over here in the Delta States. Grounded goes with Pyros, and that's to do out there. Rice farmers, the early season, they're putting it with, Helena pendimethalin, all kind of other products. Any Sinister behind cotton in West Texas. We will not sell Sinister without grounded in the tank to keep it where it's supposed to be and provide a very long residual activity.
So it certainly sounds like as growers get ready for their herbicide programs this year, as the planters go and start putting their programs together, they really need to have grounded as a part of their overall program.
Yes, they do.
Okay, guys, I want to thank you both for joining me here today on FieldLink. and learning a lot more about grounded and the benefits of that adjuvant as it helps really, quite honestly, make some of our herbicide decisions perform even at a better state than the average product out there.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Now, joining us from Nashville is Jody Lawrence with the Strategic Advisors. Jody, grain markets, we've got things kind of slowing down right now, just kind of hanging out there. What's the latest update on the commodity report, Jody?
Well, Bill, it's good to be back. Yeah, it's been, since we spoke a couple weeks ago, it's been fairly range-bound and pretty choppy. There really isn't a lot of new big developments in the market. People were worried about Argentina's drought, and it's not gotten any better. It's not gotten any worse, and their harvest is still further out. But Brazil's harvest is moving along. It's about 25% complete, and that really has been kind of the biggest fundamental impact. Obviously, we've got a lot of world political tension with the Chinese weather balloon, and our deteriorating relationship with China and how that will affect their interest in buying anything from us. And then obviously the continued escalation in the Russian-Ukraine war that looks to just not have any end, despite the fact that, and the biggest event over there is the March 19th deadline for the Black Sea export corridor deadline, and those negotiations are ongoing. So it will be interesting to see if Putin does change course this time. It's very similar to what happened the first two. Russia's saying one thing and kind of giving the market the impression they don't want to do anything, but in both previous cases they have followed through and kept the corridor open. So next 3 weeks we're just gonna see a lot of information, and that being one of the biggest things that's going to hit the market.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of questions happening right now in Ukraine and that side of the globe. We'll learn a lot more, clearly, once we figure out what Russia wants to do with that Black Sea agreement. Jody, let's move to the other part of the world, back down to South America. You referenced Brazil, some harvest things taking place there. Some recent reports here, they've had some frost in some markets. Any insight on how that may or may not impact the U.S. soybean market?
Well, we're recording this on President's Day, so the markets have not opened for the weekend news. Biden made a surprise visit to Kiev. The frost, which I've got to assume is a very early frost for Argentina, and then the dry outlook, plus how quickly Brazil's harvest is going when they do get dry enough conditions. So it's hard to judge right now. I'd say on balance, these are a little bit bullish. But until we can get further along with a lot of information that's still coming out, how big is Brazil's harvest going to be? How hurt are Argentina's yields because of the drought and this early season freeze? We'll probably kind of be stuck in this churning mode for a while as we approach the USDA coming out at their Ag Outlook Forum with acreage projection, on-farm income projection, and other things where people can start to calculate how many acres we're going to have, and a variety of other things that are going to be huge to determine where's fair value for the price of corn. Is it right here between $5.90 and $6 December futures, or November beans at $13.75 to $14 fair value? When we get Brazil's outlook, you still have an awful lot of uncertainties, and the puzzles just have not been put together enough the pieces have not been put together enough to see a clear enough picture on the price puzzle yet. But right now, the markets are kind of at the upper end of all the recent ranges. So happy for the support. And the biggest reason because of that is, as we approach the last few days of the insurance, the revenue insurance dates for February and those averages, we've only got, maybe 6 more days to do those averages. The insurance averages are on the historically high side with, as of last Friday, the 17th, December corn average is sitting right at 5.95 and a quarter cent, while November beans are at 13. Let's just call it 13.75. So good numbers that with normal yields you would figure out with all the different options from the crop insurance side that when you start adding percentage to get above the base 75%, you can really put yourself in a position to ensure a nice, a solid profit, certainly not the biggest profits that we've seen over the last 3 years on margin, but we are in a position right now where the revenue-based insurance averages are coming in with solid numbers that if everybody pays attention to the program, should give them a nice safety net of profitable margin.
Yeah, definitely. We got a handful of days here to make some decisions there. Most producers do as it relates to crop insurance. So certainly a strategy that should be in everybody's mind as we enter the 23 season. Jody, what are some upcoming reports coming up here that you're going to have your eyes on and conferences and so forth?
Well, you've got the USDA as they come out with their late winter outlooks. All their economists get together and put out some general baseline numbers. That the biggest ones are always going to be about what they expect acreage to be and what they expect trendline yields to be. And although there are some really high private estimates floating around for corn in the 93 to 93.5 million acres at the expense of beans, at the expense of cotton, we are finding, we think that the USDA isn't going to do anything crazy and that those numbers are going to be fairly similar to where they have been the past couple of years, with corn coming out at about 90 million acres with a 178 trend, and then 88 million acres, give or take a few, for beans with a 152.5 trend line yield. So with those two, the market and everybody determining prices into late winter, spring, and into planting, or at least getting an idea about how many acres we have, because it's amazing just how much 1 million acre shift really matters to the final ending stocks. You can easily move the market, 20, 30 cents just on a 1 million acre shift from beans to corn. Or if Mother Nature and we have a very mild, wet winter, mild, wet spring that has some prevent plant acres taken to it.
Jody, we got some traveling coming up here pretty shortly. You're going to be in Memphis this week, February 24th and 25th for the Mid-South Gin Show. You've got some presentations you're going to be giving.
Yes, I'm going to be hanging out with all of our friends at Helena's booth and talking to everybody that comes by. We've got a couple different side meetings, one at 11:30 and one at 2:30 in room 103 of the convention center. So if anybody is in Memphis for the Gin Show, I'd love to talk to you for a little while and just stop by, and I'll tell you what we're thinking about for all the row crop markets as well as cotton and wheat. And what we're seeing, heading into early March, which it's hard to believe we're already here.
Right, definitely. And then we'll follow up on March 9th and 10th and 11th. We'll be in Orlando for the Commodity Classic, and you'll have an opportunity to talk to growers there.
Yes, and you know what our schedule is there, so I'll let you fill everybody in on that. But looking forward to seeing everybody. That's always a great show. Walk around, kick some tires, meet some new, see some old friends and make some new friends, and just get a chance to talk about everything before we get really serious about planting the 23 crop.
Well, definitely a lot of things happening in the markets, and we look forward to having you, Jody, at those events coming up here in the next week and as well as next couple of weeks down in Orlando. So hopefully everybody can stop by, and if you're planning on attending either the Gin Show in Memphis or the Commodity Classic, we certainly want to have you stop by and catch up with Jody.
Yes, looking forward to seeing everybody, and always fun, especially even though we've had a mild winter, to get to someplace a little bit warmer and probably wear some shorts while we're walking around in Orlando.
Jody, I want to thank you once again for joining us here on FieldLink for this episode and learning a little bit more about the grain markets that are in front of us.
Thank you, Bill. See everybody at the Gin Show.
All right, and welcome back to FieldLink. I'm your host, Bill Smith, and today we're going to get Grape Wise, and joining us from California is Paul Crout. He's in the studio today, and we're going to talk about bud break to bloom. Paul, welcome to FieldLink.
Hey, thank you, Bill. Great to be here.
Hey, it's awesome to have you here in the studio today, and Paul, we want to get a little more Grape Wise. Help us understand what's really happening in the fields right now as it relates to wine grapes.
So right now, we're finishing up pruning. Which is probably one of the most important cultural practices that we do in the grape industry. How well we prune and how we prune really sets the stage for growth for the entire season. It will set the stage for how many clusters we have, how much fruit we have, the kind of fruit load that we have, how the vines grow. So that's a cultural practice that we do that's really, really critical. The second piece that we see once we're complete with pruning, we start to come into bud break. That's where the vines start to come out of dormancy. Usually we prune as late as possible just to minimize freeze, the frost potential. Those little buds are really sensitive to frost, and we get late spring frosts in California, and they can be susceptible to that. So that's why we prune so late. But once bud break happens, it's, again, a critical stage. Your fertility program, hopefully your Grape Wise fertility program from the prior year, is going to affect how strong and how well the vines come out of dormancy. So if you made a post-harvest fertilizer application back in September, October, the vine is going to store all of those nutrients and use them as stored energy for bud break, because plants are not taking up nutrients through the roots at bud break. It takes until there's usually 12 inches of shoots out there before the vines start taking up nutrients and water and the like. So that's all stored nutrients from the prior year. So that's why it's important to have a good fertility program.
Right.
And then, as we proceed with bud break, we've got a lot of things going on.
So let's go back to pruning a little bit more. I think for the average listener that's not really in the grape industry, when we hear about pruning, I mean, everybody's parents and grandmas, they always prune the roses and so forth.
Yep.
Talk to us a little bit about that hands-on approach to pruning. There's a lot going on there.
There is, absolutely, and in the wine grape industry, there's hand pruning. Most of the pruning takes place with field crews, with somebody with a pair of clippers, going through and making cuts on the vine. And what we're doing is we're removing the right amount of wood, because wine grapes are fruitful in second-year wood. Mm-hmm. So we want to have shoots from last year, but in most cases, we only need 2 buds to grow. So we're pruning that big, long, 3-4 foot long cane all the way down to 2 buds, usually. And then those 2 buds turn into shoots for the next year. And that's where those are fruitful buds. And so that's what we're doing. So we manage, if we want to have a lighter crop load, we prune to 1 bud. If we want to have more crop, we prune to 2 buds. That's in a what's called a spur pruning style. There's a whole bunch of different styles out there and everything. But for hand harvested, hand pruned stuff, that's usually what we're doing. So we have a worker who's out there trained, and they're making on a per vine, they're making anywhere from 8 to 16 cuts, and then you have 2,000 vines per acre. That's a lot of work.
That's a lot of hands-on.
Yeah, it's a lot of hand work. It's a lot of work, and when you have trained people who can do it, they do a really good job, and that can make or break yield and growth for the coming year if you don't prune very well.
Interesting, and it's important for I think our average listener out there to understand how intense this crop really is, and how different it is compared to other commodity crops.
Absolutely. I mean, we're dealing with a permanent crop, and Probably, I mean, I'm a little biased because I'm a grape guy, but
Sure.
but probably one of the most hands-on managed crops out there. You see trees, almonds, nuts, citrus. That is, they don't need to be pruned. A lot of it is done by machines. Once they're up and growing, but every year wine grapes need to be pruned. In order for them to keep producing. So there's so many touches by hand on wine grapes. There's pruning, and then as we get into, after bud break, we get into about 12 inches of shoot growth. We do what's called shoot thinning. Okay. So where we remove non-fruitful shoots, because some shoots come out, they don't have flower, they don't have clusters on them, they don't have those infant grape clusters. Well, that's a sink. They're like suckers. So we want to remove those. So we go through with another crew, and they remove all those shoots.
Because they're just
that don't
burning
have
up
pitches.
energy. They're just stealing from the crop.
Exactly. And what we want at the end of the day is all the plant's energy to go into those shoots and into the clusters that are going to end up getting us grapes.
Well, that's definitely a Grape Wise strategy as it relates to even maximizing your fertility inputs too, to make sure that those shoots are, properly managed in order that you get the most efficiency out of your fertility plan.
Absolutely. And speaking of fertility, around this time period, the vines aren't taking up very much through the soil. However, they are needing a lot of nutrients. Their demand starts to peak for nitrogen, for example, right after, immediately after the at the pre-bloom stage. But they're not really taking up not much nitrogen at the time, and so that's why I typically in my Grape Wise fertility programs recommend Coron Metra. Okay. Coron, it's a foliar applied nitrogen source. So it's also a very efficient nitrogen source. We're typically making fungicide applications at that time. Okay. So it's a very good tank mix partner with those fungicides. Provides that little extra boost of nitrogen to those vines to really maximize, their potential as they're going through this really critical phase. Because the vines at this time, we're setting the stage physiologically to set fruit, because that's that's our end goal, right? I don't care how tall your shoots are, how many leaves you have. It's all about ripening those grape clusters. And this time period is really setting that foundation to have a strong fruit set, and then strong ripening period, veraison, and harvest.
Wow, and a product like Coron Metra can certainly contribute to that success for that crop at that time of year, considering how efficient it is compared to other traditional nitrogens. Exactly.
I mean, when we the industry standard is to make soil applied nitrogen applications, post bud break. Again, the challenge, as I mentioned, uptake is very, very slow. Sure. Soil temperatures are low. The soils are usually wet, so you don't get very good efficient uptake by the plant. You can put a 100 gallons out, or you can put 10 gallons out, or whatever. The plants are only going to take up maybe 60% of that.
Sure.
And so, whereas with a foliar nitrogen source, you're going to be getting upwards of 90% efficiency, because you're targeting a very specific part of the plant. We don't need to get a whole ton of nitrogen on. We just need to get that small amount, that difference between what the roots can take up and what the plants are demanding for peak efficiency.
Wow. And Paul, kind of along with that mix with a fungicide and a product like Coron Metra, are there some fungicides, are there some adjuvants that you recommend going into that Grape Wise mix?
Yeah, no question. Typically, the type of materials that we're applying pre-bloom, usually we're applying things like fungicides like sulfur and copper and oil, horticultural oil to a certain extent. We really don't get into the systemic chemical fungicides yet.
Okay.
And so with those materials and with a nutritional product like Coron, coverage is really, really dependent. And so we're using usually a non-ionic surfactant like Induce or Kinetic. Those are two really, very effective adjuvants that go into our early season tank mixes, because we've got contact fungicides, so you need really good coverage. We have nutrients, and they need to get really good coverage over all the different plant tissue surfaces. So we want get something like Kinetic on to spread that spray deposit all over the plant, and help with coverage. So those are the keys.
Definitely two good adjuvant recommendations there for a bean, or rather, in this case, a Grape Wise program, and certainly a couple proven adjuvants out there in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, between Kinetic and Induce, I think they've both been around for about 35 years. So,
right.
They're in my opinion, they're the industry standard in their class. Both efficacy wise and utility wise.
Paul, as we're kind of moving from, the bud break towards that bloom, what are some other things grape producers need to really be keeping their eyes out for as we kind of move into that bloom stage?
Well, bloom is, as you can imagine, one of the most critical phases in any flowering crop. It's that time period where those flowers are fertilized, they're pollinated, and you set fruit. And so there's a number of conditions that are really critical for that time period. Obviously, weather, temperature, and the like. Those are things we can't really control. But things we can control are the plant's nutrient status. So typically around that time is when I take tissue samples. Is the pre-bloom time period. I usually take tissues, usually 2 weeks prior to bloom. And what that does is that gives me the kind of the information that I need in order to make potentially corrective nutrient applications or supplemental nutrient applications that can support bloom. One of the key tissue systems that I use is our extractor program. And extractor is really effective because we take samples. When we receive those samples back, it comes back in a really easy to understand format. There's nutrient tracking levels. So as I take samples year over year, I'm able to see trends for those different elements at that time. So I'm able to see, okay, am I actually, are we making any differences in our fertility programs? Are we, because the whole goal of a really good fertility program is to actually reduce the amount of fertilizer you're applying. You're building up plant health. You're building up, soil levels to an extent where we're not really having to make a lot of corrective measures. But yeah, the extractor samples are great. It allows me to track them year over year. I mean, throughout the season, and then using that information to make my adjustments to my fertility plan that I came up with in the winter. And typically those revolve around foliar nutrients, calcium, boron, and zinc are probably three of the most important nutrients that we're typically dealing with. Okay. Calcium, because calcium is a really key component in cell wall structure. And so when you have, the berry, the flower is pollinated, the time period between pollination and then when the berries are about the size of a BB, they've gone through, I want to say, 16 cell divisions.
Wow.
And then from that time, from that BB size to full cell expansion, they only go through only 4 more. So what we want to do is when those cells are dividing, we want to provide adequate calcium, because calcium is a key component in the cell wall structure. Mm-hmm. And the more calcium we have available, the stronger those cell walls are going to be. So that you get benefits of berry firmness. You get these stronger cells that then expand and fill up with juice. That's where the juice comes from. The cells expand over, and grow 10x their original size as that berry expands and then matures. So calcium is a really key component there. Boron is really, really critical in pollen formation and pollen tube formation. So actually the actual fertilization of the flower, boron is a really critical key component. And we found that supplemental boron really increases pollination. And in wine grapes, it's important that a lot of people don't realize that wine grapes actually have seeds in them.
Right.
And seeds contain a lot of the important flavor components, the tannins, that are in wine. And so we want to have good seed formation as well. So a typical berry has 4 seeds in it.
Sure.
but there are underpollinated berries that might have 3 seeds, might have 2 seeds, might have a single seed. And those affect the quality of the wine at the end of the day. So we want to make sure we have good seed formation. And then finally, zinc is the third, kind of big nutrient involved there. And zinc is involved in a number of enzyme production, enzyme processes that help with pollination. And cell elongation and a whole host of things. But all of those 3 nutrients are really driven around setting good fruit. And that's, again, we have one chance every season with wine grapes.
One shot.
Yeah, we have one shot. And if something goes wrong, then that can have a lasting effect on the yield and the quality of the fruit that you have for the rest of the season.
Well, and I think what's really interesting when you break it down like you just did, Paul, which was awesome, by the way, when you have your top 3 nutrients as calcium, boron, and zinc, in order to really know what that crop is, where it stands right now, use an extractor. That's the only
Absolutely.
tool.
Yeah. The only way you can know whether or not you have a deficiency situation or a sufficiency situation, because we're not, we take samples and it doesn't always result in a fertilizer application, but we need to know. You need to have, a test done,
right,
so you can actually see, okay, what am I deficient in? So then I can make corrective measures. So in those cases, I might take a tissue sample and I might be, okay, calcium's good, boron's good, but I'm deficient in zinc, so I need to add zinc, or
bump it up, do something,
bump it, and make an application,
Because to your point, you got that one shot.
Yeah, and
if you miss it, you're gone. It's all over.
Yep, exactly. And it's kind of scary sometimes. People don't think, you don't think about it. I think about it all the time just because I'm kind of a paranoid person when it comes to plant nutrition. But it's really, it's like, oh man, this is my one shot this year.
Yeah.
And there's a lot riding on it. So, it's critical to not only be thinking about fertilizer, but be thinking about sampling, and then being able to adjust your program and adjust your plan based on your samples during the season.
Well, and as you point out, extractor, part of the Agri-Intelligence program, is a critical piece of becoming Grape Wise and a part of your Grape Wise program, specifically out west.
Yeah, exactly. Growers who are on our Grape Wise program, as we mentioned before, it's an integrated program of building a fertility plan, based on sampling, both soil samples, tissue samples in season, and water samples. So utilizing our AquaLens water sample system to really see what we have in our water, which happens to be the largest input of irrigated crops is water. Right. So it's really important to understand the chemistry of your water. And so, utilizing those 3 technologies, and then AI 360, which allows us to monitor and to visualize those samples on a geographic format. And then utilizing the correct inputs throughout the season and adjusting based on those samples. So utilizing tools like Coron, like our Brexel micronutrients that are specifically designed for foliar use, and they're designed to be tank mixed with, fungicides and insecticides and things like that. And I think that's something that's really interesting because, when we make nutrient applications, we usually don't make a nutrient only application. It's too expensive, and it doesn't make sense for a grower to spend the money to pay a tractor driver for the diesel, for the tractor, for the equipment wear and tear to just make a nutrient application. So we do what we call piggyback rides or free rides, where they're making a fungicide application typically. Yep. So we want to piggyback onto that ride with not only the fungicides, but with the nutrient. Well, one of the key things that people often don't think about is that fungicides and things like that can have negative interactions with nutrients. If you apply non-chelated nutrients in that tank mix, they can bind together, inactivating both the fertilizer and the nutrient. So Brexel is designed as a chelate, a foliar chelate, that's designed to stay separate in the spray solution, and then be available to the plant immediately on application.
Well, definitely a lot of tools in the toolbox.
Absolutely. And that's the key. It's if, we have a whole host of tools available to us at Helena. And really Grape Wise is about utilizing the right tools, at the right time, at the right place, at the right rate, the 4 R's.
That's awesome. And when I sit back and listen to you and your passion about grapes and the Grape Wise program, I think, Paul, it's combining the art and the science of raising the best, whether it's table grapes or wine grapes out there.
Absolutely. It's and we're lucky at Helena. I have some really great colleagues who are just as passionate as I am about grapes. In the Central Valley of California, we have some great table grape guys, good grape wine grape guys on the coast. I have the fortune to be able to work with throughout the country with Helena. In next month, I'm going to be up in Oregon doing a grower meeting.
Sure.
I've been to Texas. We grow grapes all over the country. It's awesome. And so there's a lot of opportunity out there to be able to use some of the tools that are provided in Grape Wise, not just in California, but all over the country. It's
sure
applicable. Grapes grow the same. They have the same pretty much basic needs anywhere you go. And I think the beauty part of Grape Wise is that it's flexible and it's adaptable. Because grapes, it's not one size fits all.
That's right.
It is prescriptive. And the tools that we have allow us to identify, what the specific needs are for the plant and to make them work.
Awesome. And you're right. It's an interesting, certainly the wine industry continues to increase in popularity, and we continue to see, growth in this space, whether in New York or Texas, as you mentioned.
Yep.
Every state grows wine grapes at some level.
Yes, indeed. Yep. And it's wonderful to see. I've been exposed to grape growers, all over the country. And everybody's passionate about what they're doing. And, I'm definitely happy to be part of a really cool industry, in the grape industry that allows that art, as you say, to come out because that's what wine is. So
awesome.
It's art in a bottle.
Paul Crout from California, Helena Product Manager and Agronomist. Thanks for joining us here on FieldLink.
Bill, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of FieldLink. Be sure to stop and see us at our booth in the Mid-South Gin Show in Memphis or the Commodity Classic in Orlando, Florida.